look at this podcast, find this YouTube video, like people that I'd never met before, never communicated with, random strangers were willing to help and say, that's great that you're starting to think about what could be next for you. Here's what I did.
Coming up on Life from Within, we dive into 3 career pivots and the mindset behind them. Jake Gunn-Sandell, now leading strategic affairs at the company behind Canvas, breaks down how he jumped career lanes, sold the dream, and built credibility fast. There is so much packed into this episode. We get real on vulnerability as a superpower for your career, the 2-for-1 skill that you need, and a job search move that gets strangers on LinkedIn to actually help you. I'm your host, Kelly Dwyer, executive coach, team coach, career development coach. If you're ready to make a career move, this episode will be a lifeline for you. Today, I'm talking with Jake Gunn-Sandell, the Director of Strategic Affairs at Instructure, the company behind Canvas. That's one of those learning management systems that teachers and students use to do all their work at school. Everything that used to go in your backpack is now done through tools like Canvas. So in his role, Jake is helping shape the future of education and technology. He's leading government affairs and he's raising Instructure's voice on the global stage. Before joining Instructure, Jake spent more than 7 years in the fast-paced world of executive search as a client director at SPMB, where he built what he called the Polymath Practice. Think of him as a modern-day Sherlock Holmes for talent. He led over 120 executive searches, helping place C-suite leaders across industries from AI and fintech to healthcare and enterprise software. That's quite a portfolio. Jake's path has been anything but ordinary. He's gone from product manager at Colorado State University to Disney College program recruiter, and he was even a character performer. We'll have to ask you what character. Outside of work, Jake gives back as a board member for the Arapahoe Rescue Patrol, a search and rescue team supporting young leaders in Colorado. And when he's not doing that, you'll probably find him mountain biking, cheering on the Nuggets, or performing at open mic nights around Denver. Welcome, Jake.
Thanks so much, Kelly.
So happy to have you here today. Okay, before we dive into the topic that we're going to talk about, I want to know, what characters were you?
I had a very perfect body for a lot of different characters, they said. Like I was just the right height. So normally you only have like 3 characters, but
Yeah.
I was 10, and it was everything from Goofy, Woody, Sully, Beast, from Beauty and the Beast, Green Army Man. It was all over the map. And if there's kids listening to this, we always have to say Jake was friends with Goofy, not playing Goofy.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, makes sense. And were you at Disney World, Disneyland? Where were you?
Disney World, yeah, where it was hotter than hell.
I bet in those costumes.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I sweated quite a bit. I was working out and trying to like gain muscle, and I came back to Colorado like weighing less than I did because I just was in a total sauna every single day.
Oh my God. You were the walking proof of the benefit of saunas.
That's right.
From a way less perspective.
Absolutely. Getting paid $8 an hour to be in a sauna. That's
my Lord. Okay. Well, so happy to have you here today. And so Life from Within is a podcast where we talk about the wisdom and the personal growth that we gain through career challenges. And some of those career challenges could include career pivots. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Lead us in. Where do you want to start? What career pivot do you want to tell us about first?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, working in the recruiting world for 10 years like I did, I witnessed hundreds of people make pivots, or had to try and convince somebody to make a pivot, or someone asking me, what do I do next? Where do I go? And I spent 3 years of my career with a technical recruiting company here in Colorado that we actually met at, which is just from so long ago. But I was responsible for building out a program that helped college students find work within large businesses, but then also partnering with a lot of the different tech schools out there, like the Galvanizes and the Turings of the world and the coding boot camps. And that's how we met, which was just really fascinating. And I ended up, out of like 200 recruiters, at one point I became the #1 placing recruiter within the company. And I thought things were going well. I was placing solution architects, I was placing senior developers, product managers, all within these pretty much Fortune 500 companies for the most part. And I just thought I was on cloud nine, but I didn't feel challenged enough. I wanted to do something more. And then you actually helped introduce me to my wonderful mentor and boss, John Landau at SPMB Executive Search. And I then realized, oh, I was in the minor leagues. I thought I was in the major leagues, but walking into a world where you have different egos, you have different revenue goals, you have different technology, you have different investors, everything across the board when we were having to place C-level execs within public facing companies that were 500 million and above, all the way down to Series A, early stage, seed stage, even startups. And I had a total panic. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this. I thought everyone was the same. I thought I just had to ask the same questions. And C-level execs, they can be intense. And so I remember that pivot being a moment where I was starting to overthink everything and overanalyze everything. And the one thing that brought me down to earth a little bit was just compartmentalizing that new change in that new world. I called it the three school subjects of what we do every single day within executive search. And I said it was psychology, it was economics and finance, and it was technology. Like those three, four subjects. If I focused on those subjects every single day, I knew I was going to do well at my job. The psychology piece of understanding someone's personality, understanding how they work with other teammates, understanding how they deal with failure, understanding how they deal with success. And then the technology piece, understanding what type of tech have you been a part of and how is that transferable to other areas? Like fintech could be very relatable to AI. It could be MarTech that I was a part of does have similarities to ad tech. I mean, health tech has actually similarities to consumer. And so I worked on every type of different tech product you could think of, like you mentioned earlier in the bio, like fintech, health tech, martech, ad tech, AI, cybersecurity, consumer. It was all over the map. And realizing that the psychology piece comes into play, the tech comes into play, but then the economics and finance of like, what type of success did you see or what type of failure did you see within that? How did you help revenue grow? How did you help it flatten? How did you help it get acquired? And so all of those three subjects just really made me realize like, wow, if you pivot into something, you just compartmentalize it and make it a little bit easier to understand. It's something as easy as like three school subjects is what I called it. It works out really well.
What I love about the story, the journey you just described is that, so first of all, you were hired into this role because you had recruiting experience. I would also say that I was very impressed when I first met you. You have a presence, you're very articulate, you have great energy, there's a brightness about you. And my guess is John saw that and he
Yeah,
saw your recruiting experience. And even though you didn't have the executive recruiting experience, he said, oh, this could work out. So you were invited into this role that you hadn't done exactly before. And you found yourself at a loss of, oh my God, I don't think I know what I'm doing here. And so what you did was you just described how you kind of created a framework for yourself of how you were, and you use the word compartmentalize to break it down into something that felt more understandable and doable and approachable for yourself. Okay, so
that's right.
the psychology. If it's about psychology, what do I need to know? Right? And when you're dealing with executives, you are dealing with some strong egos.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like overblown egos. I mean, of course, yeah, there are some.
No, just motivated people. Yeah.
Yes, people don't get into the C-suite if they don't have strong points of view and strong personalities, really.
Yeah.
So there's the psychology, then there was the economics and finance, and then there was the technology piece. Okay, so you learned that, you came up to speed. You described the Polymath practice. How
Yeah.
is that different than a normal executive recruiter works?
It was an interesting poll calling it polymath since that just means multiple languages or multiple understandings of a certain study. But John and I were working on everything from a CFO to a CEO to a CTO to a CRO to a chief product officer, chief technology officer, a VP of payment. We just covered everything. And a lot of our clients picked up on the fact that, wow, you did such a good job on just this one type of search as a generalist, which is basically what a polymath practice is, what I was trying to establish myself as, was if you did such a good job understanding how we could place the CTO, could you help us with our chief product officer? Yes. And then could you help us with our chief executive officer? Yes. And we were able to shapeshift ourselves, but also more than anything, like pull different skill sets out of what somebody is and understanding how a CTO should interact with a chief product officer. Because we've done both CTO and chief product officer searches, we understood how that balance was so important. Same with the CRO, a chief revenue officer, and a chief marketing officer, understanding how those personalities work together as well and how those skill sets need to align. But then at the same time, it's understanding, well, how does a chief product officer, which has to touch pretty much every part of the business, how should they be interacting with a CEO? And we've done CEO searches. So it felt like we were always pulling different skills or different stories of someone else's background and being able to apply that to the new search that we were targeted or that we were working on. I came up with the Polymath practice just because I wanted to show my clients that, and the example I would give is like, if you want to hire a architect to build your home that's built the same home over and over again, great, you have that. Or if you want somebody who's built ranch style homes, condos, homes on the sides of cliffs, underwater homes, like we've done that before. And that's where I was building my practice to say, we've just seen how different people's personalities and skills and backgrounds might correlate to what it is you actually need or want versus you going after the most obvious source. Like within 2 weeks of a search, we would understand that what you want could work. It's just going to take a lot longer finding that person where it's like, if we think a little bit more creatively, we might bring somebody forward that you didn't even think about that does the job even better for you. And those were the best clients to work with who understood that. And so within executive search, to answer your question, a lot of folks will ultimately either stay with one type of C-level or one type of search. Like I only do CEO searches. And then they'll only stay with maybe one type of business where it's like, I only do B2B enterprise or I only do cybersecurity. And for us, we did everything. And it was just such a fascinating time. And we called it polymath because we could shapeshift into any type of business.
I love
Does that
that.
make sense?
Yeah, oh, it makes total sense. And, as a coach, I work with executive teams, and that's one of the things I do. And it's interesting to see the personalities play out within the context of the team. And I imagine that's part of the psychology piece that you were filtering for, evaluating for. Okay, if we're hiring a chief product officer and we've got a CEO and this CEO is pretty interested in product themselves, then the CPO has to have a certain kind of personality that's going to be able to handle the CEO being in their business.
Yep. Right.
But
That's right.
right.
Yeah.
Versus having a CEO who's pretty sales driven, understanding the mix of the team, at least understanding the personalities you're trying to match, I would imagine was a consideration for you.
Absolutely. And I've always told people that it felt like over 7.5 years in executive search, it felt like every year I received some type of new MBA because I learned from every single person that I spoke with. And I talked with thousands of execs, whether it was a 30-minute call with them, an hour call, or spending 3 weeks with them trying to help them land the dream job that they wanted to be a part of. I learned every single time I communicated with them, every single time they had to share their presentation of what they were going to do in the interview or what they wanted to talk about. And so I learned a lot of like what it takes to be a good executive. And I learned also what it takes to be a bad executive from meeting so many different types of people. It was a very interesting world of being able to see through a mirror of like how this person got to where they're at versus how somebody else got to where they're at. It was
Yeah.
just very fascinating.
You had talked about you were feeling the overwhelm being in this new role, recognizing that, okay, this isn't what I was doing before. This is different and I need to show up differently. What was that moment of realization like? What were you feeling before the moment? What were you doing to help yourself manage through that stress? And then how did you hit upon, oh, okay, I just need to compartmentalize this?
I do remember like I was working on a search, I believe it was a chief revenue officer role, and learning right away that chief revenue officers move at a million miles an hour. They care about data. They care about you actually knowing the product and establishing trust and establishing credibility. They move fast so that you got to talk fast, but you also have to be sharp. And I just remember being like, when I was working for a Fortune 500 company, it's pretty easy to like say, this is the company I'm working for and I want to place you Mr. or Mrs. Developer, right? It's like everyone can think for themselves here. this is a role where I learned I have to work on behalf of our, like, I need to sell their product just as well as their sales leaders are selling their own product to customers. And I have to sell it to these executives. And at the same time, I have to know it inside and out. I have to know the financials of the company inside and out as much as I can share. I have to know the vision of what the CEO wants to see within the company and where they've missed marks. And all of this just started to hit of like, I didn't know enough. Like I thought reading maybe a short Harvard Business Journal review would be enough. And it's like, no, I need to have a book on each company, each client that I'm working with. And so I do remember having that moment of like, you need to take more time. You need to slow down. You don't have to move as fast. Like within technical recruiting, you're picking up the phone, you're wheeling, dealing, you're calling, you're saying the name of the company. People either like it or they don't, and they move on. But when you're working for a seed stage company or you're working for a Series B company that no one knows about, no one knows anything about the investors, the product, the tech, customers, the sales, the customer success, anything about it, you need to know all of that. And that was me realizing that I just needed to pause and slow down. But I think the key moment for me that I realized that I need to get better at this, and the only way I will get better at this is A, letting my ego know that, hey, you were in the minor leagues, you thought you were a big shot and you're not. And two, showing a lot of vulnerability, asking so many questions to these execs, to our clients, to my boss, to other exec recruiters. I had to basically let my guard down and say, I don't know everything, and that's okay. And so many of the executives that I talked to, when they would say something, I would say, can you go a little bit deeper on that? I don't really understand what type of success that looked like, or what type of tech it was, or what type of customer. Pausing and making everybody realize in the room where it's like, oh yeah, of course I'm only going to talk about what I know best. And I expect you to understand that. But I gained a lot of trust with so many of my clients and with the candidates that I placed because I was just intellectually curious. I just wanted to know more. And I think that was a big moment for me realizing that I can move past this if I just ask questions and I show the vulnerability. And that worked out really well.
Okay, ask questions, show the vulnerability. You basically built a new habit of giving yourself permission to be intellectually curious and acting on that. How long did it take from you to go from feeling vulnerable about it, like, oh, I'm not sure about asking this question. Are they going to think I'm dumb? Do they think I'm not going to know what I'm
Yeah.
doing? To the place of, this is the right thing to do. I'm going to ask this question because I need this information. It's going to make me better at my job without any of the mental chatter around what this other person might think about you asking this question.
I think it was about the 6 month mark where I realized the framework that I established of the three school subjects was really working for me by focusing on the psychology, focus on the tech, and focus on the economics and finance of someone's background. I saw that, wow, this is working. We're placing people, or our client is excited by the people we're bringing forward. On top of that, though, it's the research that is really important as a recruiter and your team that you work with that's doing the research. And that's probably where I realized the polymath thing started to stick out more was when I saw myself saying, our clients are only looking for this one type of person. But what if we found somebody from this different type of tech that actually matches this type of tech and matches the types of goals that they've seen? Even if we're working with a venture capital client and they're like, we want somebody who came from a VC world, it's like, well, what if we pulled somebody from private equity that was a part of a very high scale private equity type firm that acted almost like VC? And it was just that moment of realization of like, wow, with my creative mindset and thinking outside of the box and piecing things together that our client isn't even thinking about, because if you're like, I want a red Ferrari, I want to get that red Ferrari. And it's like, did you know like a yellow Porsche could get you there too? And think a little bit outside. And so that was the funnest part I realized was the research of being able to bring people forward where even John or a client would say, why are we talking to this person? And it's like, hold the phone, but here's why. They'd have this, this, and that. And the client would say, I don't know. And it's like, believe me, you'll want to talk to them. And then they'd come back being like, thank you so much. That was so insightful. Maybe the person wasn't best for them, but it made the client realize I can think differently. That all led from the three subjects that I came up with originally of doing what I need to ask, but then asking myself, well, if we're running out of room or running out of people, where else can we find someone different and think a little bit outside of the box? And from all of the gathering of those three subjects, we could piece together what somebody else might look like from a similar subject background.
Yeah, that's really cool. These are high stakes matches that you're making,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
These are expensive hires. These folks that you're talking to are seasoned in their careers. They're not just going to say yes to any conversation. So you're selling them on the
Right.
opportunity, which is why you need to know enough about the company to be able to sell it to the potential hire. And then what you're describing is you're also selling the client on this potential candidate if the candidate doesn't look like the purple cow that the client had
Mm,
described, right?
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had a very close colleague and friend of mine say, there's three things you need to also do here to be successful. It's establish credibility, it's sell the dream, and it's slow down. If you do those three things, you establish yourself as like someone I can trust, and you sell the dream of what you believe in and where the company is going to go and what it's doing, and you also just slow down and listen, you'll go far. And it was just all about, once again, the compartmentalizing of like, don't overthink this. It's okay. There's just follow these few steps and it'll bring you to a whole practice you never even thought about, Jake, of thinking, wow, I have enough courage and enough vulnerability to tell a client, hey, I know what you're looking for is X, but I think there's a Y out there that you haven't even thought about yet. And let's play with that.
Yeah.
And the best clients would say, okay, you've got my attention. And it was fun.
I love that. Establish credibility, sell the dream, and slow down.
Slow down.
Okay. With that, let's move on to your next pivot.
Really quick, I guess just we'll call it a quick pivot break. The search and rescue team that I'm a part of, the Arapahoe Rescue Patrol, it's the only youth-led search and rescue team in the country that's run entirely by high school students. And it's been around for nearly 70 years at this point. I was a part of it when I was in high school. I was a captain of it. I was a part of it for 4 years. I led the search and rescue team for 2 years. And we are fairly the largest search and rescue team because we're all high school students. And search and rescue teams in Colorado are all volunteer, and that's mostly adult. So if you're working full time, it's hard to go out on a mission to go save somebody. But when you're high school, you're doing well in your grades, you can escape for a few days and go hike in the mountains and drink a Mountain Dew and keep moving forward. Anyways, I was a part of it, and I ended up joining the board on our fundraising group a couple of years ago now. And I came back into it, and I was so excited and I was so invigorated. But the world has changed from when I was a part of it years ago to where it's at now, where we really need funds. Like, we're responsible for all of our trucks, all of our maintenance, all of our equipment. We have to get funds for all of that, and it's donations that make that happen, or grants. And I had to soon realize, I thought it was going to be fairly easy. I was like, oh, I can ask around. Who wouldn't want to support this? But fundraising is just tough. There's millions of nonprofits, right? That was just, I guess, a quick pivot of realizing, wow, this is a lot harder than I expected. This is not the world. I've never been in fundraising before. And it was a pivot of realizing I need help. Like, we need more team members on our board that can support us. And so now we have like a committee, we have a fundraising group, we have somebody on our board who came from a fundraising background. And so she's been leading the charge and establishing steps. I don't have to be the person saying, this is where we should go next, or this is what we should do. And it just came back to the same thing that I talked about before. It's vulnerability. It's asking questions, letting your guard down, and saying, I am not responsible for having to bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars. It takes a collective group.
Yes, and we'll put the link to the search and rescue in the show notes. So if people want to donate, they can and learn more about it. What I heard you talk about there was trusting your vision. So you stepped into this role. You realized fundraising was hard, that the organization needed more than just you focused on it. And so you had this vision for, and you didn't quite explicitly talk about how this new woman came onto the board and now you have this committee. But my assumption, or what I inferred there, was you drove that vision.
I wouldn't say I drove it on my own. Our president realized that this is a lot of work, our president of the board. And she saw that I was struggling a little bit. I was like, I don't know where to even go. There's an ocean of money out there, but who do we target? We have things that we need to do on our back end. I helped bring in a new technology CRM for us to be tracking all of our different fundraising efforts. It was a collective group, but it was me kind of showing, this is way harder. This is way more than I expected or signed up for. I didn't realize like how much this was going to be. And so showing that vulnerability of versus me just never admitting fault and saying, I got this, I have to be the one that does it. I can bring in $1 million check, no problem. And realizing, no, this is so much more than what I expected. It was a collective effort of our president realizing we do need more help on the fundraising side and bringing in somebody with more experience. But that pivot of realizing I thought I could do it and realizing it takes a village to make this happen.
Okay. I love that. Again, that word vulnerability came up.
It's a theme.
Yeah. Well, and you're demonstrating, okay, when I'm willing to sit in that discomfort of feeling a little vulnerable and share my honest truth, then it sort of creates the field from which you can move forward. All right. So you went from SPMB to Instructure. Let's talk
That's
about
right.
that pivot, okay?
That was a big pivot. Yes. I love SPMB. It was very hard for me to go. I loved the people. The work we were doing was so much fun. I mean, helping folks find roles and helping companies build and scale was really exciting. And I was looking, though, for myself to maybe take on a little bit more of a leadership role and have a bigger team eventually. I'm still younger and I want to be a part of a different industry, maybe, but I wasn't sure because recruiting, you just feel like, well, this is my path. I'll become a partner here at the firm. I'll continue building out a bigger team eventually and more clients. And that's great. I thought that would be the path for me. But I had this itch where I was looking to lead more, I was looking to travel more, and I was looking to meet more interesting people, and I was looking to give back. Like those were my four things. I wrote those down on a board saying, if I do leave, I need to make sure I hit all four of these things.
Let's review them.
Yeah.
Lead more, travel more,
And meet more interesting
meet
people
more interesting people, and then the
and
fourth,
give back
and give back.
to the
Okay.
community some way,
Okay.
somehow. I wasn't sure how I was going to find all of that. And going back to what we've talked about earlier, asking questions is everything. But I had such a diverse network of chief revenue officers that I built relationships with, CEOs, chief product officers, right? All different types of C-level execs where I was reaching out to them and I was just simply saying, what else do you think is out there for someone with my skill set? And this is something that I do want to share at least for the listeners to learn about. But like finding a job these days is not as easy as an algorithm doing all the work for you. It takes a tremendous amount of work. You have to have a spreadsheet, you have to have your goals identified. You have to figure out who it is you want to speak with. I've always told people if you don't know what you want to do next, figure out who you want to work for. Start with the company first, or start with the leader that you're inspired by first, and then work your way into a role. And I was just reaching out to people who I built strong relationships with that I admired. And I thought they were really people that stood out to me of like, wow, they're going places and maybe they could give me some advice. I started my job search just by asking so many questions. What is it you liked about working with me? What was it? My skill sets, do you think that would apply to even your company or other companies? Just information gathering. And the chief revenue officer of Instructure, I've known him for a few years. I tried to place him a few times. We had established a relationship here in Colorado as good friends. And on the side, I was volunteering for the attorney general here in Colorado and who was running for governor. And this was while I was at SPMB and I was still gung ho on like, this is where I'm going to be for my career. But I was doing some side fundraising work for the future possible governor, the attorney general. And I invited James to come to an event that was all of these tech leaders who were supporting the attorney general. And this was just me doing volunteer work. And it was a political type position. And he saw that in February. And then we continued to stay in touch. And then when I talked with him in May, I believe it was, or June, and I told him, I was like, hey, I'm thinking about this next. I don't know what it is. And I told him my four goals. And after we chatted for an hour, he essentially said, I think I have something for you. It's not going to align exactly with what you've done before, but he goes, I think it's close enough. And he introduced me to the vice president of government affairs, who I work for now, who then reports to the chief revenue officer. But by showing a lot of vulnerability, by asking a lot of questions, I was able to find myself somebody taking a little bit of a chance on me and saying, there's enough here where I know you could be a builder and you can help build out this new government affairs practice, or what we're calling strategic affairs. That's essentially government affairs. It's enterprise client work, and it's also philanthropy and venture work where Gates Foundations or Zuckerberg Foundations will invest money into school districts and say, we want to use a technology to help the school district grow, or philanthropy that wants to help that happen, managing those relationships. And so everything that the chief revenue officer saw in me being somebody who is a connector, who does think outside of the box of where something can fit somewhere else, and grabbing somebody's attention by thinking creatively around here's how this could help your state or help your country or help your district grow. Jake could be the one to talk about all of that. And with us having over 20 different products and features within our portfolio and the amount of all the different products that I talked about at SPMB, it just all aligned really well. But I'm now in the world of politics. I'm in the world of government. I'm in the world of philanthropic needs. And it's different and it's exciting. But I am going back to my roots again of like, okay, don't panic. How do we compartmentalize this? How do we make this easy to understand? How do we make this pivot of doing something totally different, but finding the similarities of what I've done in my past to actually be applied to it? And I think a lot of people forget that. I think people see titles, they see different industries that they can't be a part of because like, well, it's not similar enough. And it's like, no, there are things. you have to bridge those gaps and not overstretch it because some people might, but you do have to think about how different and similar your background and skill set is.
There are a few things I want to dig into the trajectory you took us on. First of all, you talked about identifying the 4 areas or the goals, the travel, the give back, the lead. Tell us, how did you identify those areas? Did you journal? Did you go through a course? Was it through conversations with close friends?
That's a great question. I had an awesome opportunity with SPMB to work with a professional career coach, and he was based out in Bali. He was fantastic. And he helped me identify who I was and what I was really striving for. And he didn't pull me out of SPMB by any means, but he made me realize, what are my values? What are my top 10 values? And that was huge for me because I never understood what my values were. My top 3, I realized, was challenge, creativity, and inspiration, being inspired or inspiring others. And I realized how much I was doing that within SPMB and I was loving that. But I was realizing for myself, well, can I do more with the 4 things that I'm asking for? And I came across those by understanding what my values were, what I was loving about the volunteer work I was doing with the search and rescue group, with the attorney general. I do like politics and I do like the world of giving back in some way. And then one of my values was learning as well. And learning can be from travel and meeting interesting people. And so when I understood my values, I then understood what are like the main things I'm looking for in a next job, a next career. And that's how they formed, essentially. It was understanding my values was really important for me.
It's highly recommended for everyone. If you're
Yeah.
listening and you have not identified your values, go through an exercise. You can
Yeah.
find something online that'll guide you through it, meet with the coach, do it with a buddy, a friend. Highly recommend that. So then the second thing I want to dive into a little deeper is you talked about how you had all these relationships with these senior C-level folks. So you were doing a lot of information gathering is what you called it. And you began to ask them, hey, where could you see someone like me fitting? If I want to have these 4 things in my next career journey adventure, where do you see that I could fit? How did you get the courage to begin having those types of conversations?
I think it does start with Charlie, who was my coach that I worked with. It was just asking him because he had worked with kind of like me. He had worked with tons of execs like yourself, you have worked with. Okay, let's take the knowledge of what he's seen and been a part of and how does that apply to me? And I felt more comfortable gathering that information. But it goes back to originally what started my career within SPMB of understanding, establishing the credibility and slowing down and sell the dream. So I was doing those 3 things with everyone that I reached out to, where I was just like, you know me, you worked with me, you understand me from my background and how we've worked together. So that's the credibility piece. And then it was just slowing down and saying, here are the 4 things that I'm really looking for. And the dream of, can these be met? Have you seen somebody with my background go other places? I got a lot of no's. I got a lot of people saying, I'm not really sure. It took a lot of me repeating myself over and over again. One of the coolest things that happened, and this is where I don't think people take enough advantage of on LinkedIn, is I did a very creative search, and that's just me obviously knowing how to do so, but you can easily understand it. But I did a search for people within tech and who used to be executive recruiters, and then where are they now? I was just finding people who used to be in executive search and finding them in leadership roles. And I was reaching out to them and I was saying, hey, how did you get to where you're at? I saw you start an executive search. I'm thinking about what else could I do in my career to get in a different place if I wanted to. And so many people got back to me and said, oh my gosh, I know exactly what you're going through. Here's where I saw myself. Here's how I got where I was. Read this book, look at this podcast, find this YouTube video. Like people that I'd never met before, never communicated with, random strangers were willing to help and say, that's great that you're starting to think about what could be next for you. Here's what I did. That is showing the vulnerability piece. I go back to it, but just asking strangers, hey, you obviously made a pivot. What did you do? And people were willing to share.
That is brilliant, by the way, the strategy, genius. And when you say strangers willing to share, you would just DM them on LinkedIn and say, hey, I see you used to be an executive recruiter and here you're doing this now. And I'm trying to make a pivot out of executive recruiting. Would you be willing to talk with me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. I would reach out to maybe like 20 people, and at least half would get back to me with, oh, you should try this or look into this. Nothing crazy, but it was just enough to get the wheels spinning. It was cool.
So good,
Yeah.
Jake. So good. You made a recommendation to people who are looking to make a pivot, leading with company and or leader you want to work with. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, that's something that I do a lot of mentoring with college students just because that's where I started my career was helping college students find roles. And now I work with high school students who are trying to think about within search and rescue, like, do I go to school? Do I become a first responder? And so I've always had a passion for students and helping them figure out their way. And I've always asked for feedback when I've talked with them. And they've always said, like, I love how you just simplified. If you don't know what you want to do, figure out who you want to work for. I think so many people go this route of selling their resume and just applying everywhere. And it's actually a little bit more sniper related. Like you need to be strategic. And I always tell people, I'd say, find 10 companies you want to work for that are over 10,000 employees. Find 10 companies you want to work for that are 5,000 employees. Find 10 companies you want to work for that are 500 to 1,000 employees. And then find 10 companies below that. And before you know it, you have like 40 to 50 companies to choose from. And then you start realizing, well, what type of company is it that I want to be a part of? What type of leader do I want to be a part of? What type of product do I want to be a part of? You start to just compartmentalize and realize, hey, don't overthink it. Like there's actually a lot out there of different businesses, different industries that you could be a part of. And it doesn't have to be the role that you're chasing because if somebody sees something in you, and especially if you're a recent college graduate, somebody wants you to do something, just get your foot in the door, but you'll be happy that you're working for that type of company, that type of product, that type of leader, that type of industry, and start there. Don't think if you choose that one company, I have to stay with it forever. Start with just very, very small thinking of if you don't know what you want to do, figure out who you want to work for.
That's
That's kind
great.
of been my attitude to them.
That's good
And I
advice.
think that applies to a lot of people still.
Yes.
Like people who are wanting to pivot, they're like, well, I've only been in cybersecurity my whole career. And that's okay. You know, what is relatable? What is similar to cybersecurity? Probably fintech. Like fintech's really interesting. It's a lot of compliance. It's a lot of different rules and regulations that you could probably find yourself fitting into. Just start with fintech and find 10 Fortune 500 fintech companies and then find 10 early stage startup fintech companies and start there. Because if they all fail and they all say, we don't want cybersecurity is not good, okay, think again. What else is similar to cybersecurity? You might, during that process, you realize, oh, outside of fintech, crypto could be a really interesting world.
Yeah. You know, what you were describing before about reaching out, doing your information gathering calls with these executives and with
Strangers.
the strangers. Yeah. Uh, you know, I often tell my clients who are looking to make a transition of some kind, you don't have to know right away the exact role and the title and all of these things. You start where you are, you start with what you know, and you started with the four things. Here's what I know that I
Yeah.
want. And here's my background. And I don't exactly know where I'm going to land with it, but this is what I want. Do you have any ideas? Does anything spark for you, person that I'm talking to, about what I could do with that or directions I could go or other people I could talk to? And so you kind of called it into being by willing to be vulnerable and talk about it. Talk about where you're at now and what you're looking for. So, bravo. Okay,
Yeah.
one last thing, because I know we're coming up on time. The person who ultimately hired you, James and Chris, and one of them, I think it was James, used the word builder for you. And that's essentially a belief that they could have about themselves. Was that something you knew prior to hearing him call you that you were a builder? Or was there a process you went through to try that identity on and then embrace that identity and understand what it means for you?
That's a really good question. Because I actually think what we started with originally, that I started with, was I'm very creative and I think outside of the box and I know how to connect people to different areas that they hadn't thought about before. And then both James and Chris said, you know, that's building something. That's building someone's career for them or building a future for the company of that person coming on board for their goals and what's needed. I was not using the word builder. They were the ones who kind of saw that in me. By me just establishing myself as like, I am creative, I know how to think differently. And they said, well, we need someone to help build out this business unit. It sounds like you've built other things before, or at least you've started on them and you've had a plan and a roadmap and an idea. And I said, yes, that is me. As long as you're conveying, but I think it takes a lot of work for somebody to like, for me to even say, and believe in myself that I am a creative thinker. I know how to think outside the box. And that started with me understanding my values. That started with me building out the ideas of the 3 school subjects from years ago and following with that. I think everyone can help somebody else find a different path for them if you know how to effectively communicate who you truly know and what your values are and what you've been a part of. And somebody else will hopefully, a good leader will see that in you and say, you're actually this, you are a builder. You're trying to build, even within the Arapahoe Rescue Patrol and like fundraising, like I was trying to build things, but I was falling. It was just so much work. And it's like, we need to build more around that. And so even though like I didn't say accomplish building out like a $20 million business, I started the plans for it. I started the ideas for it. I started the architecture for it. And people see that. I
I
think
think
it's
it
just
does.
starting with one word of who you are and somebody else hopefully gravitating towards that and seeing something in you. But you have to be able to demonstrate that and talk effectively about it.
Yes. And be willing to talk about
Yeah,
it. Right?
that's right.
Right. Be willing to talk about it. And what haven't you said yet in our conversation that you want to make sure that the listener hears?
I think we've talked about it a lot. You don't have to have everything figured out. Ask a lot of questions, show the vulnerability. I will say to a lot of the execs that are listening to this, ask for feedback all the time from the recruiter that you're working with, from the boss you're interviewing with. Show the vulnerability of like, I don't know everything. What else did I miss on? Because I've seen tons of execs fail because they use the word I versus we. I see them not being able to understand that to be an exec, you have to have a 2-for-1. Like if you're in sales, you need to be a numbers person and you need to be spreadsheet driven, not just motivating people. You have to also, if you're product, you need to be a sales product person. Like you need to get sales pumped up on what you're doing, but you also need to get technology pumped up to build. And if you're technologist and you're a CTO, like you need to understand, well, what's customer success talking about? What is the CS team? Like you need to have a 2-for-1 for everything you're a part of. And so I think a lot of executives out there think that they have everything figured out, where a recruiter can be a gateway to them saying, well, I talk to thousands of different people of different backgrounds, and I can help you grow differently. And you should use those recruiters in your life to grow yourself. And before you know it, that's you establishing the vulnerability of saying, I don't have it all figured out. You probably talk to a lot more people. What else am I not saying, or what else should I be doing?
The 2-for-1. We can't end without me diving into that a little deeper. So everyone should have a 2-for-1. So tell me, as a coach, like what would be my 2-for-1?
What's coming to mind immediately is active listening, but it's also active applying, right? It's like, okay, well, if I'm hearing what you're saying, I'm applying it to these skills of what other people have said to me prior. And I think that 2-for-1, it's almost being like, I'm a psychologist and a psychiatrist in a way, listening to everything, but I'm going to then the psychiatrist piece, I'm going to give you a dose of something, and that's you applying to what their needs are. And if I had to put it in executive terms, gosh, it's so many. It's being product, it's being marketing, and it's being, I'd say it's maybe those two combined, those two functions, where it's like, I'm understanding the person themselves as the product of who they are, but then we have to market you for where you need to go next. I think that's the 2-for-1 that a coach should bring, is understanding the person, the product, them, and then understanding the marketing of, well, how do we get people to be attracted to who you are, and how do you get people to be attracted to who you are, and
Yes.
understanding all the different products that you have.
Yes, I love that. And that is for anyone who's making a career pivot for sure. And as a coach, anyone who's trying to make any kind of transformation. And so the way I interpret what you just said was it's the listening and the reflecting back and understanding who the person is in front of me that I'm
Mm-hmm.
hearing and interacting with. And then it's taking that and offering ideas, suggestions, perspectives based on all the years of coaching conversations, based on all the background that I have, right? So I'm applying what I know, offering it,
Yeah.
right? And then they can
And,
choose to take it or leave it.
That's right. But if you were to talk to a CEO who wanted to hire you as, like, say, their COO, and they were to say, well, what can you bring? If you just compartmentalize it again and you just say, well, I've done product, which is people and understanding their products, who they are and their skills and what they have to offer, but I've had to market them as well. I'm your product and your marketing leader. That's what I know. And it's thinking so simple and so creatively in that way. And there might be a little bit of sugar coating on top of that, but that just gets the wheels spinning, right? It just gets
Yeah.
you thinking a little bit differently about yourself and not taking everything so literally. Wow, I do run those two functions within my business of coaching or whatever it is you're a part of. Just simplify it a little bit, but make it fun.
Okay. Simplify and make things fun.
Yes.
So, Jake, if anyone wants to follow up with you after they listen or watch this conversation, where do you want them to go to find you?
LinkedIn is like my best friend. I know it well. So find me on LinkedIn. I'll always get back to somebody on LinkedIn.
Oh, thank you so much for your time today, Jake. This has been a
Thank
wonderful
you. This has
conversation.
been great, Kelly. Thanks for all the questions and thanks for doing what you do with inspiring people and helping people realize what their potential is. We need more people like you.
Thank you. Well, I love my
Yeah,
work. Have a wonderful day.
you too. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning into Life from Within. See the show notes for links and resources mentioned in today's episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, follow, and share it with friends and family who might enjoy it too. You can also leave a review. It helps others discover and benefit from the podcast. Until next time, keep living and leading from the inside out.